6:30 to 8. So we just want to make sure we maximize that time. Um, just a quick introduction. So my name is Todd Chico. I'm the chairperson for counseling here at the high school. It's a tremendous honor to welcome all of you. It's tremendously different and weird, and it's not at all how we normally like to work with all of our students and families, but at the same time, it's been a wonderful resource and been able to do this and still kind of provide the same type of opportunities that we've done over all of the years. So we're working hard to make sure that we're getting all of you exactly the same type of training and information and background and everything we feel you need to help get you through this process. To start, I know on behalf of the counselors, we're super excited to kick all this off. I know for many of the students, they've already been kind of thinking about this for years, and for some of the families, it's your first student, and for others, it might be your second or third, and this is just a completely different way to kind of go through this. But at the beginning of all this, I just really want to reinforce how excited we are as a department to work with not just your students, but you as families, and also all of the admissions officers who we'll introduce to you in a second. We've been working very, very hard over the past couple of weeks to kind of pull together like what's our plan of support for our kids and families as we start this process and go through this process. And I know Victor, one of our representatives, was asking kind of messaging that we may want to kind of give from their side, but also from our side. And the first thing I would really want to make sure that you all know is not only are we super excited to help, we are here to help. So really, whatever you need along the way, each one of you has a counselor. We work super closely together as a department, so we really try to make sure that we are all supporting all of you and all of your students through this whole process. So if there's ever a question, if there's ever a concern, if there's ever something that just doesn't seem right, please know that we're here to help out, and definitely just let us know how we can help out. Tonight is kind of our official kind of kickoff. I know we did a
Todd, you might have muted yourself accidentally.
Yeah, just did it themselves there. So now what we're trying to do is kick off the junior presentations and the way we're going to support the juniors. So tonight's our college panelists. Starting on Thursday and Friday, we now go into our junior groups where the students on their asynchronous days or their days that they're not in class, their English teachers have all shared links for the counselors so that we're going to be meeting with our own students in small groups. So those all of the students should have access to those times. If they haven't, please ask them to reach out, or kids just reach out to your counselor and we'll be happy to share those with you. Tomorrow with our groups, there is a slideshow our PowerPoint that we're going to go over. There is some information that we want to kind of give you to get started. And then we are going to basically, for the next couple months, we're going to roll right into individual meetings. Some of that might be specific about where you're at in the process. Some of it may just be a kind of a check-in, but that's when we really start to individualize the entire process for you. In January, on January 28th, for parents, we're going to have our junior parent night, and that is going to be where parents will meet with the student's counselor, and that's going to be where we start to personalize it a little bit more. We're going to speak a little bit more specifically about our process and our time frame and kind of how we're supporting kids. In the beginning of March, we're going to have our second group with the students by counselor, and we'll talk a little bit more specifically about creating lists, and we'll talk about testing, and we'll talk about who they should ask for recommendations and kind of more of that kind of time frame. Then we continue with our individual meetings. In May, we do our college essay presentations that we'll host through the English department that we work collaboratively with our English teachers. We have a night for students who are on a 504 or on an IEP where we meet with families about some of the uniqueness of that process and how we can support those students. And then we kick off right in the beginning of next year and senior year. We have a whole series of trainings and presentations and opportunities for families there. So what we really try to do is wrap around the entire throughout the entire process, just that we try to keep giving information that we think is timely and helpful. A night like tonight, as many of you know, takes a tremendous amount of time and training and opportunity and conversation. The department, we've been meeting in our department meetings, talking pretty extensively about it. But I'd also just really like to highlight the kind of some of the behind the scenes work that Violetta Pavlovska and Jenny Gable and Sarah Clinton and Lindsay Roseman have done, because without them, this night doesn't happen. So they are just a huge shout out to them for their time and all of their thoughtfulness that they've kind of done in pulling this together. And then on top of that, we have these wonderful admissions representatives who are taking their nights and their time to meet with all of us and help answer a lot of questions. Some of them are people that have helped in other presentations, and some of them they're first time volunteers to help us throughout this whole process. So what I'd like to do is just introduce them briefly, let them talk about themselves, their program, and then after that we'll start to get into some of the questions after that. We have one admissions representative who had a last minute situation that came up, and that is Dustin from Ithaca. Unfortunately, he sends along his apologies. It was totally not something he was preparing for, happened last minute, so he's not going to be able to be here, and we weren't able to fill that fourth person. But truth be told, and as we were talking with our other three representatives, they are more than equipped to handle all those questions. So Rachel, I'm going to start with you, if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself for us.
Sure, absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Rachel Boyle. I'm an associate director at Boston University. Been at BU for quite a number of years now. And I've been the representative for the Acton-Boxborough area for coming up on 11 years. So I know the school really well. I know the area really well. I went to Wheaton College for my undergraduate degree, Wheaton in Massachusetts, and then I got my master's degree at Boston University in education, policy, and planning. Todd, would you like me to talk a little bit about BU or just personal?
Yeah, absolutely, that'd be great.
So Boston University is a university, so we're structured into schools and colleges. We're bigger for the Boston area. We have about 16,000 undergraduate students, and we are a residential campus. So that's something that's pretty special about BU. We guarantee housing for all 4 years. We also have a lot of students who are undecided, so you don't have to know exactly what it is that you want to do if you want to be a BU student. Students change their mind all the time. They switch schools within BU. They double major. They do a lot of really fun and enriching things outside the classroom. It's still happening on campus, even with a pandemic. You know, we've been able to pivot to make a lot of things virtual. And just so you all know, we do still have students on campus. So BU's residence halls are at about 70% capacity right now. And I'm also, as I said, your representative. So anytime you have questions about BU, please feel free to email me anytime.
Awesome, thanks, Rachel. And just so folks know, we're also recording tonight's presentation, and we'll share it out just so that you'll have access to it as well. Doug, if you could go next for us, that'd be fantastic.
Yes, happy to. Again, thank you so much for having me. My name is Doug. I'm Assistant Director of Admissions at UMass Lowell. I'm also a graduate of UMass Lowell. It's a place that's been so good to me, both personally and professionally. So I'm always really, really excited and happy to share my experience, but just the experience of our students and what we have to offer here. I, like Rachel, have been doing this for a little while. I'm just finishing up, coming up on my 10th year anniversary in admissions at UMass Lowell. So that's pretty exciting. And I've worked with the great folks here at Acton-Boxborough for many years on these panels. It's been a lot of fun. So I'm really happy to answer any questions about UMass Lowell, the UMass system. If you have any questions, I can do my best to answer those questions as well. UMass Lowell is a mid-size public university, part of the UMass system. Obviously, we're around 11,500 total undergraduate students. We have about 5,000 students who live on campus in a typical year. We are currently mostly virtual, but we do have a small presence of students, about 800 students living on campus right now. It's going to bump up to about 1,400 in the spring. We're really excited about that. It's been going really well in terms of keeping everybody safe and healthy, which is pretty great. We are a Division I varsity athletics program, have 120 different majors. We're traditionally known for our sciences and engineering, but we have everything across the board. So I'm happy to be here and kick off your college search experience. And looking forward to your questions. Thank you.
Awesome, thanks, Doug. Victor, we're gonna pop over to you now.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me tonight. Acton Boxborough counseling team. My name is Victor Thomas. I work at Washington University in St. Louis. Unlike Rachel and Doug, I am not the regional. We do have a regional rep who covers Massachusetts and your school, but she is in the middle of a professional MBA program, so she takes classes in the evening after working a full day. So Anne Sarkeesian is your actual rep, but I am happy to be here. I have worked at WashU for almost 10 years, and I happen to be a graduate of WashU, not always the case, right, with admissions reps, but like Doug, I attended WashU. I'm from the East Coast originally, so I like to say, or I like to think that I can really relate to this idea of thinking beyond Massachusetts or the Northeast or whatever it is. And I think that there's something to be gained from 4 years in a very different environment. And so I encourage you to kind of keep that, whether it's, in-state or out-of-state, right? You might be in a more small town environment for college, which is very different than growing up outside of Boston, right? And so that is just something to keep in mind. As far as WashU, we're a medium-sized, like Rachel described, we're a university as well. And so we have that structure of colleges and schools under the umbrella of the university. At WashU, we have 5 academic divisions that you can apply into as an undergraduate: arts and sciences, engineering, business, art, and architecture. And what I think really is valued most by our students academically is the flexibility between the divisions. The fact that you could be studying biomedical engineering in the McKelvey School of Engineering, but also pick up a second major in Spanish, or take classes in photography in the College of Arts and Sciences or the College of Art. And so I hope that tonight will be, everyone else mentioned COVID plans. We've also been kind of hanging in there with COVID, shuffling things around as far as starts and stops of the semester, but I echo Rachel and Doug. We've made it work virtually, and I think that that's all you can hope for, and we're lucky that we're able to, and our students are a big part of making it work. So glad to be here tonight, and looking forward to your questions.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much, Victor. So as we are getting ready to kind of roll into our questions, we have been working as a department, trying to collect some questions that we think would be helpful for families. We also did send out a link for families, so I know many people submitted questions. Violetta and Jenny and Lindsay and Sarah and I worked through those questions to try to look for themes, and we try to kind of pull those together. Jen has offered to kind of monitor the chat, so if there are questions that come in, Jen is either going to try to kind of jump in and add it. She may try to answer it individually, or she might, it might be something that we have to address kind of offline. One of the asks that we have is that the questions as they come in, tonight's not a night necessarily for specific questions about you, the student, or your student. It's more, if you have those questions, all of our admissions representatives and all of the colleges and universities we've worked with are happy to ask them, and feel free to reach out to them, or feel free to reach out to your counselor. But we'll try to make this work as best as possible. Also behind the scenes, Violetta and Lindsay, as you've noticed, they've shut off their screens because they're helping work on the technical side of everything. So they're making all of this happen much better than myself. So I'm going to start with our first question. I'm just going to ask all three of you, and Doug, if you wouldn't mind starting. Obviously, there's been a lot of change from the pandemic that's impacted the admissions. And if you could just speak a little bit to has there been any change, or what is your process for reviewing applications, both generally and throughout this process? And do you see any change for this class of 2022 that they should be kind of considering? So Doug, if you wouldn't mind kicking that off.
No, absolutely. Happy to. So, actually, we worked really hard to try to keep our application review process as consistent as possible from year to year. So, from where I sit, it hasn't changed all that much in terms of how students apply, how we review those applications, and then we just happened to release our decisions tonight, by the way, which is pretty exciting. So that just happened. So we're really excited about that. What I would say in terms of for applicants to the university, I think it's important that that we totally understand how weird this year. I mean, it has been weird for everybody for a million different reasons. Personally, professionally, all of us in such an isolating way have gone through this really communal experience, which has been kind of weird. But we understand that part of the context of your application is that there have been some ups and downs. Virtual learning may have gone better for some people than it did for others. I see some schools go to pass fail or credit no credit, and we keep those things in perspective. So I guess the only sort of change that I've seen is just students being concerned about how are you going to view the last semester, the spring semester. And I just want to say we're going to keep it in the context in which we know it belongs, that it's not the end all be all of your application review. But in a general sense, it has been pretty consistent and unchanged from our previous years.
Awesome. Thank you, Doug. Rachel, would you mind jumping in there?
Yeah, so I completely agree with what Doug said. We are experiencing and know exactly what's happening because it's happening to us too. When I was talking to students who were so worried about last semester, lots of schools went pass fail, or lots of schools had to make decisions about, do we count Q3? Do we count Q4? What do we do? BU was doing the same thing. BU was pass fail last semester too. So we have that real understanding. In terms of the changes that will come to the application process, BU did have a big change. We are test optional this year. BU has never been test optional before, but we knew that a lot of students weren't able to get tests, and frankly, it might not be safe for them to go and take the SAT or the ACT. So we adjusted that. We haven't made a decision for juniors yet, but if things continue along this pathway, we're going to make decisions that are safest for students. I think where I tend to get the most questions now that people have kind of adjusted a little bit more to virtual learning, is about extracurricular activities. And I know we're gonna talk about them a little bit more. But every application, as far as I'm concerned, for the next several years is going to have a big asterisk that just says, I did all these things during a pandemic. I'm not expecting seniors to have a ton of extracurricular activities. They might not have any this year. I'm expecting to see huge interruptions for juniors. And so part of what admissions officers are very used to doing, and I think families don't fully recognize that, is how much we take context, like Doug mentioned, context into account when we're reviewing applications. So just know that we know, and if you're ever worried that we don't know something, just tell us that. That I think is really important.
Victor, would you mind jumping in?
Sure, and Doug and Rachel have covered a lot of it. Doug, first of all, you are exceedingly brave to be on a panel in the midst of decision release. I hope it goes swimmingly for you all, though, and that you don't have to hop off.
So far, so good.
So, I think Doug and Rachel really covered it, but Mr. Chico, I think that you might be getting to this at a later question, but I think the biggest change that we have seen, we too have adopted a test optional policy for 1 year. We are in conversations with university leadership about extending that, because we know that it's not just the current seniors that were impacted, it's you all, the class of 2022. But I think that the biggest change that we have seen is how we have had to pivot and offer programming that's available to students virtually. Again, I know that we'll get into this, but I think what we've kind of learned is that we can do this, and B, it's worth keeping in some forms. Of course, we would love at some point to welcome you back to campus and visit you all in person, but we've learned that it's actually possible to do a virtual information session that people show up, and there are students from places across the world that benefit from the virtual opportunities that we've discovered that we can offer. So that's all that I have to add.
So Victor, I'm going to just ask a follow-up question, and then I'll see what Rachel and Doug feel about it afterwards. So it was a real nice option, I think, for a lot of kids and families that so many schools went test optional. I know some schools were already test optional, but I think that there was an increased, a growing number of schools that followed that trend. Do you foresee that trend continuing for next year? Is that kind of a wait and see till the spring to see how things go? Or what do you all foresee about that?
Yeah, so I don't have a crystal ball right now, but again, I know that we are in conversation with university leadership about this. Um, I think that any decision that we make, and that I believe the vast majority of colleges will make, will be in the interest of the students that are applying and that ultimately are enrolling and attending, right? The reason why we can't have students on campus right now, or the reason why we can't have visitors to campus right now, is because we are working to ensure the safety of the current students that we have on campus. The reason that we decided to be test optional is because we knew that A, students didn't have access to take the test, and B, that whenever they did have access to take the test, it was a risk that they were incurring, and that was not something that we wanted to put on students. So that, using those two guiding principles, if I had to guess, I don't know. I feel like we probably will be test optional, but I know this is being recorded. Please don't share that with our chancellor yet. But I really do think that whatever decision we make, it will be in the interest of and safety of students.
Rachel, Doug, anything that you would add or?
No, I think that's really important just to know that university leadership has been really good at prioritizing everyone's health and safety. And, also thinking about the fact that tests are nerve-wracking anyway. And so it's really hard to take a standardized test when you're worried about the standardized test, worried about college applications, and worried about a little something called the global pandemic. So hopefully, I think this will be a trend going forward, but we don't have a final answer yet either.
At UMass Lowell, we became test optional in 2015. So we have been test optional for a few years, and it's here to stay with UMass Lowell. It has been part of our process and will continue to be. Though I would say in general for the industry, you see more and more schools every year adopting a test optional policy. So I would expect, and to what Victor said, like so much of this, the changes that have come about over the last 10 months or so, are proving to work out for schools and students, that I would expect a lot of this to stick around and in some shape or form. So it is growing every year, test optional schools, but it's certainly going to persist in UMass Lowell.
So one question I want to ask the three of you is, and I think we've seen an increase in the, I think that everyone knows about the SATs in our area, but there's definitely been an increase in the number of kids taking the ACTs. And I know some schools have looked at ACTs and will say things like, if you take the ACT, you don't need to take subject tests, or like, can you just each speak to your policy around standardized tests and subject tests and ACTs, relatively speaking? Doug, I'm going to start with you if you don't mind.
Sure. So we, if you do choose to submit tests, we have zero preference as to which test you submit. All we ask is that you send us all of your tests, and we, our interest is putting your best foot forward and putting you in the best position. And we can only do that with all of the information. So if you've taken the SATs a couple of times, or SAT and ACT, send us everything and we'll determine what your absolute best score is. For both ACT and SAT, we don't use subject tests. For ACT, we look at the comp score is our score that we use for decisions. SAT is just the math and evidence-based reading and writing is what we consider. The essay portions is not something we consider at UMass Lowell. Yeah, we super score the SAT, meaning we will take your best math score, your best evidence-based reading and writing. They don't have to be from the same session. So again, that's why I recommend you send us all of that information. Yeah, so that about covers it. We don't have any preference, either or.
Rachel?
Trying to unmute myself. So BU does not require subject tests. Sometimes students will ask, is it recommended? If I send them in, will you look at them? They're not a required part of the application, so we don't weigh them in the review. We will physically see them, but they aren't used in your review. So the SAT or the ACT, no preference. If you were ever curious, the College Board always posts a conversion chart every year between the SAT and the ACT. That's what we use. And we're making sure that we're looking at your highest scores. We'll super score the SAT, we'll super score the ACT. We do look at sub-scores within the ACT, just to check for consistency. But really we have no preference, and we'll always take, like Doug said, we'll always take the highest scores that you send us and completely disregard. We won't even see the lower scores.
Yeah, I think that WashU is very similar to BU in terms of taking both, super scoring both, not requiring, not expecting SAT subject tests. I want to mention, I think it's important to know that they are two very different types of, they're two different tests. And it's actually quite interesting how students fare better on one or the other, just based on their learning preferences, their way of taking tests and the type of tests that they perform well on. I was a high school teacher for a few years here in St. Louis, and every student takes the ACT, which was different from my experience growing up in New Jersey. I took the SAT, and I sensed the kind of stamina that you need to take the SAT was different than for the ACT, because the SAT flipped back and forth between two sections, whereas the ACT was 60 minutes of this, 60 minutes of this, 60 minutes of, right? So work with your counselors. They know the tests, and they can kind of, and it's never, why am I promoting taking tests right now when you can't? But, should you be able to take tests, try them both out and see which one, kind of it showcases your ability better.
Thanks, Victor. I think one of the things that we've been hearing a lot of questions, we heard it a lot from the senior classes. They're kind of going through their process, and we're already starting to hear from juniors, is there's a lot of logistical concerns around visiting campus and doing the research, and a lot of the things that kids and families normally do. What would you guys recommend, either in terms of if kids are able to visit, or in lieu of visiting, or what steps would you recommend for the research piece? And then also, are there any special opportunities or programs that you may have on your campus, or that you may refer to people to? Rachel, can I start with you? Is that okay?
So I actually organize all of our virtual events. So this is something I spend a lot of time thinking about. But one thing I always like to frame the conversation with is there's students every single year who pick the school they're going to without ever visiting. They might not have been able to visit. They just might not have had time. They might not have had access. It might be too far away. So students have been doing that for years and years and years. And so I think the best advice I can give you is, try out a couple different events. A lot of places will have a broad general event. Some will have really super specific events. That can be a fun way, once you get to know the school a little bit more, to get an idea for the community feel, the culture of the school. I always recommend talking to current students. I think they give the best information, and they can help you figure out fit. And a lot of times the student volunteers might also be those exact same students who chose to come to the school without having the opportunity to visit. So I know we had a lot of student ambassadors who spent a good deal of the spring sharing what it was like with students who were worried about not being able to physically visit, what it was like choosing a school, and, what do they wish they had known, what helped, what didn't help. So I think just being open to different things and making sure that you're talking to students, I think that's the most important thing.
Victor, anything you'd add? Or
Yeah, I'll add that many colleges have virtual tours up, and so utilize those. They're really the next best thing. I like to brag a little bit about our team that actually put together. So the virtual tour you can take, but it is, you can take the virtual tour anytime and listen to the recorded version of it, right, at your own pace. But if you sign up for certain times, you can actually take a live guided virtual tour with one of our current students. So they're sharing their screen. It's still the virtual tour, but you're hearing live narration from someone. So I like to promote that. And then the final thing that I'll mention is, and I never thought I'd be mentioning this or promoting it like I have been the past several months, follow our social media feeds. that is like a really great, authentic way. When Rachel says connect with students, we give our Instagram account to a couple students occasionally to take over, and they do Ask Me Anythings, and you can chat with them and ask questions. I have promoted TikTok more than I ever thought that I would. So those are, I think that those are, you know, good and effective ways to learn about colleges and universities.
Awesome, thanks. Doug?
Yeah, so I think, I mean, pretty much the same things. We offer, you know, information sessions. Coming up in the spring, we'll offer, I mean, many different opportunities for juniors to, you know, what would have been like open houses or, you know, junior preview days, that kind of thing. There'll be many different virtual opportunities, whether it's through the admissions office, through different academic departments. We're really trying to encourage different offices on campus to offer programming as well. So if you may be interested in hearing about athletics or pre-med or, you know, any of those different things, they'll be running those types of programs for you to engage with. You know, we're only about 20 minutes away from you folks. You know, we're not very far away. We are an open public campus. You're welcome to come poke around, drive through the campus. I mean, Lowell's a pretty unique place as a campus with our, you know, couple different academic campuses really close, but right on the Merrimack River and stuff. So I think it's a place that's worth just driving through to get a feel for what it's like. And, you know, in the spring, there'll be more students to kind of see walking around. I think overall, I would say, reach out to the admissions offices as well and find out, and they can point you directly to where you can find all of these opportunities. And we'd be happy to point you, you know, help you find a program that would work specifically for you and really to what you're looking for. So, you know, engage with the offices, the admissions with the schools and the offices, and we can point you in the right direction for whatever it is that you might be looking for. Because I promise it's all over our websites, and we're happy to show you where, you know, point you in the right direction.
Do any of you track demonstrated interest? And if you do, how do you track it during a time when kids can't visit, or they may have to do drive-throughs or be doing virtual tours? You know, I'm just looking, Rachel, or would you mind starting? And then I'll go.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, really, we track it. We've always tracked it based on contact with the office, like visits, or if you come to a college fair that I was at, we always have you fill out a little card. So we do that for virtual visits right now. Even if it's just your name and email address, we'll keep a log of all those points of contact. And then if you decide to apply, we'll just add that. So as far as we're concerned, virtual events are just as good as coming to campus because, you know, our visitor center is closed. You can't come visit. So virtual events are just as awesome a way to show that you're interested. And we just do that through registration forms.
Victor, do you guys?
Sure. Yeah. So you know, every college, whether they say it or not, like tracks demonstrated interest, not to utilize necessarily in the application process, right? But we need to know what was effective, right? Especially in this virtual setting. I need to know if that webinar that I spent like 16 hours, you know, putting together was actually attended by more than 15 people. And so that is something that that many colleges use a very similar system to kind of maintain those records for their own edification and for their own kind of benefit. I will say that it has come into play in our process a little bit occasionally, but I want to get back to something that Rachel said to an earlier question regarding context, right? And as the representative west of the Mississippi, I am here to tell you that we're not expecting every student, you know, even in a normal year, every student from Acton-Boxborough to visit WashU. We might be expecting it more from a student who lives across the river in Illinois, in Southern Illinois, right? Who's 30 minutes away from WashU's campus. But even then, we know that not every single student has the same circumstances, the same kind of, you know, you have great college counselors, you're at a great school, that you're in a great community that is aware of some of the benefits of registering for visits and, you know, emailing admissions officers and making those contacts. And so that context piece, that is something that we take into consideration too. It's not kind of a uniform, quantifiable, like, for a visit, you get 5 extra points, and for attending a webinar, you get 3 extra points, right? That's not how it works.
How about you folks, Doug?
We just track it for our own person, see how our recruitment efforts are working, but it's never come into a play in any of our admissions decisions.
One of the things that we try to make a recommendation to kids is to obviously follow you all on social media, but to also be aware of their own social media presence, what they're putting out there. Do any of you, I think there's either a thought or a worry or fear that colleges are looking at students in their social media. Do any of you look at that or have interns that look at that?
Not at UMass Lowell, though I would say it's a good thing to be conscious of, because my guess is employers probably go back a little ways, and I mean, I'm a little too old to really understand all that, I suppose, but and how deep that runs with employment searches and stuff like that. But it's not something we look at. We're not there yet.
Right. So we also at our school, we do not rank our students. We have a 2 GPA system, a weighted and an unweighted. Our weighted is on a 5.0 scale and our unweighted is on a 4.0 scale. I know that some schools have a preference for what they look for, and some schools take our GPA and they put it aside and they recalculate to their own GPA. Could you each speak to how you approach the grade point averages and breaking down a transcript and how you review it? I know, Doug, if you wouldn't mind, I'm starting just because I know that we have, you guys have a pretty tight plan on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And my answer really can apply to the entire UMass system and how we all go about evaluating transcripts, at least in a technical sense. So it's really laid out by the Commonwealth, and the Board of Higher Ed has, kind of lays out the process of recalculating and evaluating transcripts. So it's all laid out in black and white right on the website, the Board of Higher Ed website. You can check it out yourself. But what we do is when we receive a transcript, we're required for every single applicant to recalculate that transcript. So whatever the grade point average is from the high school, that's really more of a rule of thumb, but it's not something we use as part of our evaluation. We will put all of the classes into our system. We give a full letter grade bump for any AP courses or dual enrollment courses that you may have. We give a half a letter grade bump for any honors courses that you may have taken, and then standard credit for a CP level course. And then it spits out a new GPA, and that GPA is what we use for admissions, honors college, merit scholarship, the whole thing. We usually come out a little, if it's an equivalent scale, because high schools, every high school is different. There's 100-point scales, 7.0 scale, it's all across the board. So, but if it's an equivalent, weighted 4.0 scale, we usually come out a couple tenths higher, because they're, within the rules, certainly can do some things to put you in a best position possible. So we come out a little higher, but it's not a secret. It's not something we're hiding from you. If you'd like to know what the recalculation is, you just give us a call and I'm happy to walk you through exactly how the recalculation worked out. But that's how it works, and then that's what we use for the admissions and all of the subsequent decisions we make on merit and stuff like that.
Excellent. Victor, how do you guys approach it?
Sure, yeah. So I really like that explanation, Doug, because I think that I could be wrong here. I think that it contrasts with kind of how we approach GPA, which is that we don't see GPA as a static number value, right? And I think that both Rachel and Doug, you could speak to this too, that 2 students could have the exact same GPA after the recalculation, but arrive at that GPA in very different ways, right? And to different degrees, colleges will take into consideration whether a student with, a 3.5 started strong freshman year and then dropped off by senior year versus another student who still has a 3.5, started off a little shaky in 9th grade, but has really grown into their own. And so that kind of, we call it a trend, right? A grade trend. And that is part of our transcript analysis that goes beyond just a singular value. And there's a lot of value in having a singular kind of static GPA metric. But again, in keeping with this idea of context, we do like to go beyond it.
How about you guys, Rachel?
I we don't recalculate. BU doesn't recalculate. So we actually take both GPAs. If you are looking at our average admitted profile for all of our applicants, that is an unweighted GPA. So your quote unquote official GPA is your unweighted GPA. But we do look at the weighted GPA. But what we spend a lot more time doing is we look at every single class, every single grade, every single course, subject, and then every single course level. And we spend a lot of time, with that context piece. We always get the school profile along with the transcript. Like, no matter how well you know the school, you always get the school profile. And what the school profile does is breaks down exactly how the GPA is calculated, exactly what courses are offered, if there are any limitations or restrictions on, how class scheduling works, when students can start to take APs, if there are any unique course levels or things like that. So that's how we review the transcript. So really, like Victor was saying, GPA exists. It is a data point in your application, but it doesn't give the whole picture, and it doesn't tell us enough. We want to know how much you've challenged yourself, because college is a challenging place. So we would much rather students find that right balance of challenging themselves and academic success and making sure that you're learning, and this is enriching. This isn't just making you completely burn out and do hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of homework every night and get 3 hours of sleep and you're just left weeping in the morning. That's not healthy. That's not what we want. We want you to find that balance, because you're going to have to do that in college too. You're going to have to be able to balance your college courses. And so finding that right mix is much more important to us.
If I may, can I jump in real
Yeah,
quick?
of course.
Because
Sorry.
I think I gave about 80% of an answer. So that's, I do want to say that, as a public university, GPA, test score, those are really the main drivers of admission. It's just the nature of public higher ed in Massachusetts. But part of my job and our job in the public higher ed counseling community is really, following up and saying, outside of that sort of, those quantitative things, what is it that, isn't compelling about the student too? So if there's somebody who may be on the margins of admissibility, I don't want anybody to think that it's just like rubber stamps, boom, deny, we move on. We are still counselors, and we're still looking for reasons to advocate for a student, which I think can be lost sometimes with public higher ed. I think people can think it's so straightforward, black and white, and that's really just something to be aware is not the case.
Thank you. Rachel, you touched upon a point where you were talking about the school profile, and I think one of the things, if you look at our school profile, if you get to know our student body, they're remarkable. I mean, they do unbelievable things, and when you look at it, they're super high achieving and competitive, and they value education a lot, and they work very hard at it. Do you take into account, when you're reviewing an application, the high school that they're coming from? And do you also take into account how many students from that high school are applying in that class to your school? Rachel, can I start with you, and then
Sure.
the other folks?
Yeah. So I think that's where the context piece is really important. I don't compare schools directly. So I don't look and say, okay, well, AB is this and CC is this, and, LS over there, they're doing something else. So AB is better than blah, 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 blah. I look to see what you did at your school, because that's what you can do. And I know that AB is a very rigorous place. So I know that when I'm reviewing applications, I know that when I'm reviewing your transcripts. We're incredibly lucky. We have a big applicant pool. BU had over 61,000 students apply last year. And we always have a lot of students from Acton-Boxborough apply to BU. So the question of, do you have a limit on the number of students you can admit from AB, and do AB students have to compete head to head? Thankfully, no and no. So we do not have any quota, because come on, you guys are great. You do such a great job, and you prepare so well, and you're so excited and exciting that we want to have you be part of the BU community. And no, you do not have to compete against your peers. That's not how we review applications within a school group or even between different schools. So put that out of your mind. Don't have to worry about that for BU.
Awesome. Thanks, Rachel. Victor?
Yeah, Rachel said it extremely well. You know, you're not pitted against each other in this experience, and it's really important to know that there are no quotas, there are no limits. That's illegal. The only quota that we have is the number of beds that we have like physically able to like have students in, right? So I actually, and if this is okay, Todd, I'm looking at the chat right now and see that Vikram and Harrison asked kind of questions following up on this topic. And so, you know, I hope that Rachel's points regarding context and not, you know, kind of pitting students against each other, that kind of answers your question, Vikram, that you know, if you choose kind of the hybrid mode versus the in-person or fully remote mode, you know, we are expecting that you are choosing the best option for you, and that will lead to, you know, the best outcomes that you can produce within your high school experience. And then Harrison, to your question about trends, that again is trends until the shift to online, right? And that's a huge piece of context, right? And really what we're trying to get to, that this has been a really challenging time for students, for educators, for lots of people, and so we know that this has kind of disrupted things. But we need you to communicate it to us. If it has impacted you in a significant enough way that you think that it needs to be communicated, don't expect that we will just, you know, kind of recognize it. We might see that the straight A student all of a sudden in spring of 2020 became like a straight C student, and we read into that. Probably in our process, we're fortunate enough to have relationships with your college counselors and be able to reach out to them and say, hey, this student really was doing well, and then all of a sudden just dropped off. What, you know, can you offer a little bit more light? More often than not, that will actually be communicated in your counselor's letter of recommendation, right? So all that context does get taken into consideration.
Excellent, thank you. How about you, Doug?
I have nothing to add. Those are two fantastic. Applies all the same. Yep.
We oftentimes, as we're working with families, and I think one of the things that comes into part of their decision making process is the money piece. And I think that there's a question around scholarships and what are you looking for scholarships, and how do you view financial aid packages? I know that's not necessarily the admissions realm, but is there anything that you could add, or any advice or recommendations that you would provide for students? Doug, if I can start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in an indirect sense, I think this, so what part of my job is I'm the scholarship coordinator. So I coordinate our entire scholarship program for our undergraduate and transfer populations. And I think such an important part is reaching out to the schools that you're interested in and finding out the differences and their processes, because when you talk about the financial side and in particular scholarships, money is pretty limited at the public level, right? Where, you know, Massachusetts in particular does not fund higher ed at a very high level. You know, when I started, it was around 70% funded higher ed, funded by the state. We're under 20% funded by the state. So, you know, merit scholarship can be limited, and you want to know when to apply to maximize your opportunities at merit scholarships. You know, so that's just the reason I bring up communicating with us is because, you know, the answer might be different at UMass Amherst than it is at UMass Lowell, than it is at BU, than it is at WashU, than it is at Salem State, than it is at UNH. So it's really important, and that's more than just the financials. That's, you know, what's important in an application. You know, how can you best put yourself in the best position to be admitted to whatever schools that you're applying to. So communicating with the schools is super important. To more directly answer your question, you know, I think we're really lucky here that our upper administration has really committed to level funding merit scholarships. In fact, they've sort of encouraged that we go over and above what we did last year to really understand that everybody's can be in some sort of pinch here financially to do the best we can. So, we've really committed to a really comprehensive scholarship program at UMass Lowell. But with us, we tend to give the majority of our money away during early action. And that's really something you would only know if you attended one of these events or came to my table at a fair or reached out and contacted our office. So you'll communicate with the schools to find those little details. Hopefully that answered the question.
Can I just ask a quick follow-up to that? I'm just curious to know, in looking at those scholarships, are you still considering SAT and ACT scores for those?
Yeah, so yes, certainly,
Yeah.
absolutely. So this was a very interesting year. I mean, we probably had 5 different meetings with my dean of enrollment. I mean, director of financial, like so many people, all sorts of people way above my pay grade that I was sitting in this meeting with them. And usually those meetings in a typical year, really only, 2 meetings that we hammer out the scholarship program. It was 5, 6 meetings this year. The big change we saw was an increase in test optional students, where we usually get about 20% of our applicant pool is test optional. It was over 60% this year was test optional. So we had to really rebuild our scholarship program to equitably award students who apply with test and without tests. So it was really a rebuilding of our scholarship program, but certainly we want to do our best to reward all students for their academic merit, no matter how they apply to the university.
Victor or Rachel, is there anything you'd add or anything that you would say different?
Nothing to add necessarily, but I do want to clarify too, because you might not be familiar with it yet on the Common App, that I mentioned, make sure you let us know about any disruptions or anything additional, any context, right? There's a section on the Common Application for additional information, which is just a really important, space to use if you need to use it. So I just wanted to make sure that you knew that.
Awesome, thank you.
I would say that scholarships and financial aid tend to be where schools have the widest differences in how they award and how you apply. So what Doug said is so important. You need to stay organized, and you need to make sure that you're doing very detailed research on each school and what they require, how they require it, and when they require it. Because I think, even if you're really college savvy, financial aid and scholarships, it can feel like schools are speaking a different language. And a lot of times they are. I say BU offers merit scholarships and financial aid. Those are 2 different things. But at another school, their financial aid might mean their scholarships too. So make sure you're asking those questions and make sure you're staying really organized. And when you do your research, stay away from the sites that have information in the aggregate. Look directly at the school website, because BU's website, that's our job. We are on top of making sure that it's updated. Places like College Board, places like Naviance, any scholarship sites, they work really hard to make sure that it's updated, but that's not the source of truth for things directly from the school. So make sure that when you're researching, you're doing it on the school website too.
Excellent, thank you. I think along the lines of admissions, one of the most popular questions we get is there a benefit to applying early decision or early action? Is there an admissions bump, or do you look at those applicants a little bit differently? Are they, does the standard change? Could you just kind of speak to your school's philosophy on how you approach the early process? Victor, I'll start with you if you don't mind.
Sure. Yeah. So as you wade into this experience, you'll start to learn all this lingo a little bit more, but I just want to start with some definitions, right? And early decision options at colleges are generally binding agreements with the college to enroll. So it's only enroll if you're offered admission, right? It's only a good option to apply early decision to a college if you know that college is your first choice school. That differs from early action, where it's not binding, right? You can still apply early, hear back early, but it's not binding. At WashU, we have early decision options. We actually have 2 rounds of early decision, that binding commitment to enroll if offered admission. So again, only apply to WashU or to another school early decision if you know that you would enroll in a heartbeat. And generally, that binding agreement that you make with a college does confer some statistical advantage. It doesn't, I heard an admissions officer once describe it as like this. It's not easier to get in it's not easier to get in early decision, right? Colleges aren't dipping in their admissions criteria. They are still asking themselves the essential question, will this student succeed at WashU, at BU, at UMass, right? But it's harder to get in regular decision because when you look at the entire applicant pool, you know, of the 30-something thousand applications that you receive, a good 85, maybe even 90% of them, based on their metrics that they submitted to us academically, the answer to that question, could they do the work, is yes, right? But we're not admitting 85 to 90% of our students. So there's in some ways kind of a blank slate in the first year class when early decision applications are being reviewed. But then some more limitations, right? It could be a financial aid budget. It could be you know, a particular program that's already over enrolled, and we know that you want to be at colleges that have a diversity of academic programs, right? And so we need to ensure that when we're crafting the final class through regular decision. So to answer your question, Mr. Chico, yes, there typically is with early decision options. Some, it could be slight, it could be more than slight at some places. It kind of depends. There usually is, though, a statistical advantage because you are telling that school that you will enroll, right? Only 1 out of every 4 students that we admit regular decision enrolls at WashU. And so knowing that a student is binding themselves through early decision is in a way appealing, right?
Excellent. Rachel?
I could
I'm just
not have
curious.
said it. I could not have said it better.
Yeah.
The one thing I will add is that you should only be considering early decision, you know, the binding option, if the school is your first choice. You should not be looking at it as a tool to be admitted to a really competitive school that you might not be admitted to otherwise. That is just a recipe for misery. Early decision is for students who know this is 100% where they want to be. You know, you might come to that realization really early. And so the November deadline for early decision 1 could be appropriate, or it may take you a little bit longer. And some schools like BU does, WashU does, they offer early decision 2, which the deadline is usually the same or, you know, right around regular decision. So you have that extra time. So I think my advice is don't put pressure on yourself to apply somewhere early decision just because it might have a small statistical advantage. But also, you know, don't feel bad if you don't have a school that stands out to you. You know, it's okay to have 5 top choices. It's okay to have 5 schools that you think you could be really happy at. I think that's just important to remember too.
Excellent. Thank you. How about you, Deb?
So, you know, also I can speak for the, you know, the public arena, at least in the Northeast, is that, you know, I don't know of any public university that offers an early decision process. We're all early action based for the most part, or rolling for like community colleges or generally the state, like Salem State or Bridgewater State, those kind of places. So, you know, there is no particular statistical advantage to applying early at UMass. Well, in fact, I would say that I've seen a trend of, we kind of had a sort of moment of self-reflection going, if somebody's applying to early action, why are we deferring somebody who may, you know, who is really interested to apply early? Why are we asking them to wait till regular decision to get their answer? So we're, you know, even if in past where early action may have been a little bit more competitive to be admitted, we've kind of come to the point saying, why are we asking anybody to wait, you know, for a decision? We're just going to end up admitting them anyway in March. So let's just admit them now. So I think that's sort of trending towards a blurring of the timelines. In general, I recommend anybody who's interested in UMass Lowell to apply early action. It really cannot hurt you in any way. It can only help you. And it does tend to be, again, one of those details with us I mentioned earlier, when it really maximizes your opportunity for merit scholarship. that isn't to say we don't offer it during regular decision, but because the last few years we have offered a pretty comprehensive scholarship program to regular decision students, but it really maximizes your opportunities. But otherwise, admission rate is the same as regular decision.
I know a
Just
lot of the
like-
schools now have a wonderful financial aid calculator online that families can use as a reference as they're trying to make that decision. Does it impact financial aid or financial aid packages if a student is or has decided to apply early decision or early
Thanks,
action?
Doug.
Would you like me to start with that?
Please.
So we have a priority deadline. So we require only the FAFSA form. We don't have require the profile or anything like that, just the FAFSA form. And we have a priority deadline of March 1st for students to get their FAFSA form filled out. And as long as they have submitted the FAFSA form by March 1st, they're considered a priority candidate, and they are they have access to all of the financial aid, need-based financial aid that we are able to offer. If you, let's say, apply to us really late in the cycle or after our, we accept applications through basically like June, even though our deadline, our regular decision deadline is February 5th, we'll still accept applications from folks, but they may not get their FAFSA into us until that time. Then they apply late in the cycle. They might have a little bit limited access to financial aid. But at least with us, the FAFSA form is not really, it's a parallel process. It's not, it's not really connected until you're admitted to the university. So I would say if you're interested in whatever university you're interested in, fill it out now, just so you have it in. And then once, at least with us, once you're admitted, those things link up and you get your financial aid package about a month after you're admitted to the university. So.
Victor or Rachel, anything you would want to add?
Yeah, I would say that this is another area where early decision and early action are going to diverge a bit because with early action, it's not binding. But with early decision, it is binding. And so there is a real ethical consideration. Schools, there's a National Association of Schools, and having scholarships specifically tied to early decision is not the best practice. So BU doesn't do that. We do meet full need though. So you're eligible for the exact same financial aid under early decision as you are under regular decision. But because we meet full financial need, one of the things that we might take into consideration when making your admission decision is the amount of financial need. That much later in the process, we don't always use it. It might be one consideration for students who are on the bubble because we do have to pay attention to our budget. But merit-based scholarships, those are completely need blind at BU.
Yeah, I similar to Rachel's response at BU, WashU is extremely lucky that we have the financial resources to commit to meeting 100% of demonstrated financial need. Not every school is able to do that, and so our students are incredibly fortunate that we have those financial resources. And I really appreciate the opportunity to follow up here on this topic because it is really important to know it's different at every school. And at WashU, and at the majority of schools that will meet full financial aid, right? Full financial need, you will get the exact same need-based financial aid package, whether you apply early decision 1, early decision 2, or regular decision. It's in that way, it's different from scholarship, right? That might be spread out a little bit more. And maybe, part of the thinking with merit scholarships is we really want this student who's an academic all-star and has done some great research. So we're going to use some scholarship dollars to encourage them to seriously consider us, even though we know that they have many other options, right? But need-based aid is going to be totally based on your family's financial circumstances, and you would get the exact same package regardless of the round that you apply. So what does that mean? That means that at a school that is fortunate enough to have that policy and meet 100% of need and offers an early decision option, if you know that that school is where you want to be, right? And you've had that conversation with your family and done the net price calculator to figure out what, you know, what you might be expected to contribute and what the school would be meeting as 100% of that need. You shouldn't worry about applying early decision, because you would get the exact same package if you applied regular decision, right? And almost 100% of the time, right, if a student and their family applies early decision somewhere and they fill out all the financial aid paperwork, right, and they get a package and it's not sufficient, right? The first step to do would probably be to have a conversation with a financial aid counselor to make sure that there is nothing that wasn't captured in the FAFSA or in those forms that you complete that we would take into consideration, right? But if it doesn't work out, we're not going to ball and chain you to paying, you know, to enrolling. Unfortunately, the reality is you would be getting the exact same package in regular decision. So if it's not going to work out in early, it's not going to work out in regular. And so at that point, we would probably, schools would probably be closing your file, just because, you know, if it's not going to work out in one round, it's not going to work out later on. But make sure that you ask those questions. Make sure that you reach out to financial aid. I hope I didn't overly complicate that, but I think it's just a really important message to hear.
Thank you. I think I'm going to shift questions just a little bit. And one of the questions we're getting a lot from kids, and you've all spoken to it a little bit, but with when kids are choosing activities and they're focusing on how they're spending their time outside of the classroom, obviously our kids do some remarkable stuff, and some of them do have a remarkable portfolio of activities. Some of them work extensively, some it's athletics, some it's research and internship. So there's a pretty wide array of responsibilities. Can you speak to, one is there anything that you're looking for in a profile of a student? And also, if with the pandemic and how it's impacted some of those opportunities, what would be any recommendations you'd have for kids and how they would fill their time, or how I think, Rachel, you talked about a void in the application. You're like, are there things that you'd recommend for kids for their activities and what you're looking for? Doug, if you wouldn't mind, I'm going to start with you, if that's okay.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I love talking. That's fine. You know, the way I look at, or the way we as an office look at extracurriculars, those type of things, it's really more of a value add. It really only adds to an application. It does, the lack of activity, or maybe somebody, you know, has fewer than somebody else, you know, it doesn't hurt them negatively. It's not going to negatively impact anybody's application. I like to see, and really just, again, it's sort of the public higher ed doesn't give us a ton of room to really put a ton of judgment into that. We're built around access, equal access, no matter really who you are. So that's, you know, it really comes into play when people are on the margins of admissibility, where it would really impact. What I like to see is, you know, for somebody who might be interested in mechanical engineering or computer science or any of our robotics or something like that, for somebody who might have need me to bring them to a committee review process, I'd love seeing their activities really based around that, and, you know, being involved in FIRST Robotics or building stuff or having internships. But, you know, that's like a personal thing I like to see. But, you know, if that's not the case, that's fine. I would say that, going back to the context portion of the conversation we've had, if somebody's just lacking anything right now, that's totally understood. I do nothing but work and then go watch Netflix. So like, what else is there to do right now? So, you know, I don't hold that against anybody. That's not really an issue, you know, for us. It's just not part of our review process to sort of gate, you know, put a number on what somebody's doing, you know, outside of the classroom.
Terrific. Rachel?
You know, I think what Doug said is so important, in that while BU is one of the schools that does review extracurricular activities as part of part of your application, part of your admission decision, for us, it's always been more of a way to learn about you and what you like to do and what you might bring to our community. So it's much less tied to certain characteristics or certain activities or a certain number of hours you should be doing things. And in this case, you know, I'm being really careful to only speak for BU. But I'm completely fine if all of a sudden you don't have activities anymore. That's fine. That I think everyone just needs to start being comfortable with saying, this is the best I can do, and that's good enough. And the best you can do is going to wildly vary from day to day, maybe even throughout the day. You know, I read articles of well-meaning advice that say things like, oh, you know, in quarantine, you know, learn how to bake bread, learn how to knit, learn a new language. Well, I have a knitting kit on the floor gathering dust. I have a Duolingo app that I unsubscribed to all notifications because I couldn't stand that little owl yelling at me about learning Italian anymore. Right now, survival is fine. And honestly, there's such a severe limit on things that you can be doing. I just want you to be staying home and staying safe and taking care of yourselves. You know, if it is enriching to you and you're enjoying doing things like knitting, please email me and tell me how to knit. But it's personal enjoyment, it's personal enrichment. This is such a hard time right now anyway, that I don't want you to be adding things to just look good on a college application. I think this is a question that you really should be pretty upfront in asking colleges and asking what their expectations are, and then deciding if that aligns with your values and if that's something that's okay with you. We're not penalizing students for not doing things. You know, if you work at CVS and you're still working right now, that's amazing. If you have huge family responsibilities, especially now where a lot of, you know, younger siblings might be home or your grandparents might be living with you, things like that, those are significant responsibilities. That's the kind of thing that I want to know about. But no, you don't have to worry about, and this is a long answer, but no, you don't have to worry about finding a research opportunity that's somehow magically online and captures what you would get in a lab. Things are just going to be different for a little while. And all I want is for people to be safe and comfortable. And anytime you have questions, again, reach out. Talk to your representative, talk to your counselors too, because that balance aspect that's present in your academics, that's present outside academics too.
That's what I meant to say. She's so much more articulate than I am. That's what I meant to say.
You're all fantastic.
No, Rachel has really covered it well. And I want to elevate that, you know, Rachel was injecting some examples into her response, and I think it's important to elevate them, because oftentimes I think that students feel like activity, like what they need, what they have to report to colleges has to be something that's school sanctioned, that's a team or a club or an organization or a committee or a council, right? Knitting, Duolingo, baking, these are all things that you do outside of the classroom that are part of you and that provide an outlet, that provide some structure. And that's what a good kind of extracurricular does, right? Is it makes you a better student because it provides some space to think beyond your homework assignment or get lost in, you know, some sort of painting that you're doing or piece of music that you're writing, that provides structure. You know, our athletes at WashU, their best GPAs reported are during season, right? Because they have that structure of they have to get up and go to practice at 6 a.m. in the morning. And that means that they have to figure out when to do their schoolwork outside of that. So don't do things just for us. You know, we see through that, frankly, when we're looking at a list of activities, and it's just important to do what makes you happy.
Thank you. Can you all talk a little bit to kind of what you're looking for from an essay? You know, the essay is obviously such a significant part of the process for kids. Can you just kind of talk a little bit about what you guys are looking for and how you use that in the light of their application? Rachel, if you don't mind, I'll start with you.
I think it's pretty similar to extracurricular activities. Learn more about the student. You know, it's age appropriate writing that we're looking for. You know, I'm not looking for the next James Joyce. Please don't write your essay like James Joyce. I know lots of people love, I might be horrifying English teachers out there, but use your own style, use your own voice. We're expecting to hear from high school age students about high school appropriate things that are important to them. There's always a way to integrate topics that are really special and important to you in your essay. Conventional wisdom that's out there a lot is, don't write about your grandmother, because you'll write a biography of your grandmother and it's just going to be like, oh, we want to admit Rachel's Nana because she's so cool. Well, as someone who wrote my college essay about my Nana and how cool she is, I made sure that we talked about, spending time together. My grandparents lived with my family growing up, so it was a little bit of a different experience. I talked about our relationship. So you can always talk about what you want to talk about, within reason, be appropriate, as long as you are in that essay too. And yes, my Nana is the coolest Nana.
Victor, anything that you'd add about the essay?
Yeah, I'm Rachel. You're awesome. That really kind of sums it up. I want to say something, and I'm borrowing this from someone else, so I might get it wrong, but it truly resonated with me when I heard Jeff say it on a similar panel, is that he had never, and I by extension, have never read an essay that really, that took a student who wasn't already admissible and kind of resurrected that student's application, right? Essays are confirmation, right? That this student is, academically qualified and ready, and brings this story to WashU, and they've been willing to share that. On the flip side too, I've never seen a student who had, all-star application and then the essay, for whatever reason tanked. It's not going to, totally sway that and really be a nail in the coffin. It's one piece of many that's considered. So
Doug?
That covers it. Yeah, certainly covers it.
How about, I'm gonna keep it with you, Doug, and ask just about when it comes for interviews. Do any of you offer interviews? Are they information or are they more evaluative, and how do you approach them?
Yes, interviews are not part of our application review process at all. They're purely informational. In fact, our admissions sort of approach is really informational. We are not here, we're recruiters in a sense, but really we're here to provide you the information you're looking for about UMass Lowell. We hope it resonates. We hope it works for you. But that's what we're here to do, is to be serving you information about UMass Lowell. Anytime you have a conversation with us, it's in an interest of just trying to get you the info you're looking for. It's never part of the evaluation process.
Excellent, thank you. Rachel?
BU doesn't offer evaluative interviews. This year, for the first time, we offered student informational interviews where you could sign up and meet one-on-one with a current BU student just to ask questions, but they didn't take notes and they didn't share any feedback with the admissions team, so we don't have any information about those. It was purely so that students could have that one-on-one connection to ask questions and just chat.
Thank you. Victor?
We also offer interviews. We've never required them. They are totally, optional. We do allow, and the vast majority of ours, especially now in the virtual environment, are conducted by students virtually, as well as alumni. So it's not going to really significantly impact an admissions decision. We do have a short kind of form that the interviewers will complete. It's not extremely evaluative. It's really basically just a gut check of is this person a kind individual that so I wouldn't worry too much about them. They're more informational opportunities to ask questions.
Excellent. So I know we're nearing the end of the night, so I just have a couple more questions. I just kind of I've been trying to track the chat, and just as we've been kind of looking at what we have and haven't covered. I know obviously we'll be getting ready to do course selection in a few months, and I know there's a lot of questions around, is it better to get a lower grade and a higher level, or a higher grade and a lower level? And also, how does the all of the decision making around AP exams and I know last year they were online, and we're not sure what it's going to look like this year. Can you just give what advice you'd have around course selection, AP exams, if they're important, and how to choose the right level of course for them? Rachel, if you don't mind, I'll start with you, and then we'll keep going through.
Yeah, I really think this is where, especially for me, I want you to find the right balance. So sometimes I don't think it's as binary as, should I take an honors course and get a, A, or should I take an AP course and get a B? It's always going to be a mix. No one takes only one level of course in my experience. And so it's working with your counselor, where are my strengths? Where can I push myself? Where might it make more sense for me to take a class at a different level that the subject itself will be a challenge for me. It's always a mix in my experience. And, every semester, or every course selection, you might just be toggling things up and down a little bit based on the previous years and figuring out what works and what doesn't work. Personally, BU does not look at AP exam scores for admission. We only look at them for course credit. And we did award course credit for the AP exams this year and plan to going forward.
Victor?
Yeah, similarly, strike that balance, right? We're not expecting you to take every single AP exam or every AP class offered at AB. And, at the same time, we want to see challenging yourself, right? Especially in the areas that you might be interested in studying in college. So if you do have an opportunity, a field where you can share with a college what you're interested in studying, sometimes part of a committee review, right, is taking a look at that interest. Let's say it's biology, right, and seeing if the student has taken advantage of the most rigorous or at least somewhat rigorous coursework within that area.
I think balance is key. Similarly, I honestly, my answer is pretty exactly the same as Rachel. We're looking for the right fit of classes, right mix of classes for the student that hopefully maximizes their potential. And whatever that may be for that student, it is what it is. Similarly, we gave college credit for AP exams, really no modifications to our AP policy at all. So just, have those exam scores sent to us at the appropriate time, sometime after you're admitted, and we can give you college credit for almost all of them.
Excellent, thank you. So I think my last question is really is more for you in terms of like, if you were to give either one piece of advice or one truth at admissions or one recommendation or philosophy that a family should take as they're embarking on this journey, kind of what would that be? We just kind of love to hear your insights. Victor, if you wouldn't mind, we'll start with you, and then we'll kind of go to Doug and finish with Rachel.
Sure. I always like going first for this because then that means that Doug and Rachel won't steal my piece of advice. But actually, I don't think that many people give this advice, but I think that everyone really actually agrees with it. My advice is to get enough sleep. Because if you don't get enough sleep, if you're really, if you think that all that matters is the grade on that calculus exam, you're probably not going to put together the best application that you can that shows you as a well-rounded, healthy, kind of individual that's mindful and thinking about your mental health. So get sleep.
Thank
you. I think that it's so easy for us, especially now, to just sit at our computers. We can really shut out the outside world. We don't have to leave our houses all that often. But understanding that our offices across the board at every college and university, we are here, we're open for business, and we really want to communicate with you. Take the time to just spend 5 minutes calling the schools that you're interested in, get the little nitty-gritty details as to what, just communicate with us. Every school does this differently, and I would hate for you miss out on an opportunity because you assume the whatever our process is at UMass Lowell is the same for UMass Amherst, and they're pretty different. So just communicate with us. We're here. We're open. We love talking, as you can see. We love to be communicating, working with you, and joining you on this journey you're on over the next couple of years. So just communicate with us. We're here, and we'd love to help you out.
Man, that's all really good advice. My advice, and this is where I'm gonna like lean forward and start yelling into my microphone, but I know it's so hard, but I want you to start practicing now, completely divorcing your sense of self and self-worth from your admission decision. There's absolutely nothing tying them together. When you think about what an application is, it is maybe like 10 to 15 pages of paper and some numbers. You know, that can never, even if you did the best application that anyone has ever done in the history of the world, that in no way encompasses who you truly are and what you're capable of. You know, Victor said something earlier that I think is so important and is lost sometimes in the application discussion, is that most students who apply to most colleges are capable of doing the work there and are admissible there. And it's just a function of the number of students who apply to a specific school. And, you know, sometimes certain subjects or majors might have different requirements, but a lot of times it's just a function of numbers. And I don't want you losing sleep over, you know, if I don't get into BU, that means that I wasn't good enough. That means that, you know, I should have done a better job on my essay, or that B- in AP stats, that's why I didn't get into BU. That's not why you didn't get into BU. You didn't get into BU because the pieces of paper that you submitted, we didn't have room. That's it. That's all. You know, making college decisions, it's really, really hard. And college admissions officers, like Doug was saying, we look for reasons to say yes. And we really get pretty passionate and pretty opinionated about the students that we're discussing. And, you know, depending on how fiery the person is, you know, people get mad about students who, you know, we might not have room for, or we might not have space for. And it's not because of who you are. It's not because of what you're capable of. You know, one thing I think that surprises people when I talk to them, if they don't get into BU as a first year student, I tell them, you know, apply as a transfer student. And they'll say, well, I didn't get in, you know, my first year, I don't want to be disappointed again. And I say, transfer admission is completely different. You know, we just look at your college work, basically. If you can get a 3.0 in college, you're a great fit for transfer admission to BU. That is so wildly different from first year admissions that I really want you to practice so hard. And I know it's hard work, but separate that out, because I think that with sleep, that with communicating, is going to make this process a lot easier for you.
Awesome. Well, you know, Doug, Victor, Rachel, I can't thank you all enough. I know it's been I'm sure it's a long day of working all day and then spending the evening with us, but tremendous. I so appreciate all of the time. For the families, I know we've put into the chat an exit ticket that we'd love to hear your feedback. We'd love to hear your feedback in terms of tonight programming, kind of how we can help you. If you were going to walk away with one thing from us, just remember to know that we're all here for you, both on the admission side and from your counseling department. It's a process, and it's a daunting process, but it's not an impossible process. We'll get you through it. Everyone's here together to help you get through it. So just let us all know how we can help out. To my counselors, V, Lindsay, Jen, Sarah, I know there's other counselors in the audience that I've been seeing. You guys are also here. Thank you guys for everything. You know, we can't get here without all of you. So have a wonderful night. Have a wonderful evening. We'll talk to you soon, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
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 Well done.
Thank
Gracias.
you.
Thank you.